I hope that the live stream has been started. Can I get a sign that everything is okay? And we are live. Thank you so much. Welcome, everyone. My name is Agnes Sarolta Fazekas. I am the Charm EU Work Package 6 on Inclusiveness Work Package leader. And today I'm delighted to have the session with all of you. The session is about inclusion by design, mainstreaming, inclusion, and diversity. And we are delighted to have the colleagues from other European alliances, Utopia. Let's start with the session with a brief overview before we start the welcome things. So this session aims to bring together two alliances to discuss inclusivity aspects in terms of the European university initiatives. And we are also happy to share milestone steps, what has been achieved both in the alliances. In my presentation, you will hear more tangible actions, how to put inclusion in actions. And as well, we have the Utopia's presentation on their work on inclusiveness. We will also make sure that you will be active during this session, and we are counting on your active participation. And I kindly ask my colleagues to check the live stream questions later on. And we are extremely delighted to have the colleagues online and also on location. So let's move to the next slide. So we have here today 4 speakers. I have Katarina Gillo-Nilsson from University of Gothenburg, project coordinator of Utopia work package on inclusion. Seima Al-Mehrai, University of Brussels, and we have Louise from Warwick University joining with me online. And I'm very, very happy that this collaboration has been happened. Let's start with the workshop structure. So now I started to time the time because we are respecting the time. As we have 19 minutes, we started with a little bit of delay, but we will keep the 90 minutes. We have a little bit of ice-breaking activity with you online and offline. And then we will join into the 2 inputs from the alliances, and then we open the floor for questions and answers, and then we look for the future, wrap up the session, and take some steps for the future. So technical information, those who join online, we are live streaming and you can also have your questions as well. And I kindly ask my colleagues to support the process, that it's smooth and also accessible. What is the workshop atmosphere we are planning here? So first of all, we are very counting on your active participation. We are really welcoming your questions and concerns. And I kindly ask everyone to keep up with the patience because we are live streaming, we are on location and online, so please be patient and flexible. This is also a good exercise for inclusiveness and accessibility. And we hope that your constructive feedback will improve future events later on by the conference organizers. So with no further ado, I would love to start with a little bit of activity. And this is the conversation starter questions, the first interaction with all of you. And I will open the other platform with the Mentimeter, which is an online interactive platform. And I kindly ask everyone to go on your smartphones on menti.com and use the code 29176285, and I put also on the chat, and I kindly ask the colleagues probably put on the whiteboard if you have the chance. And let's see how my technology works here. I prepared the session, prepare the Mentimeter, and now I will start presenting it. You also see my presenter mode. What is also important as a technical feature that you need to click on to the next slide when I'm changing the next slide. So let's start and let's see if it goes well. And I kindly ask the on-location audience and also on location. Oh, that is wonderful. People are already putting the things. So the first question is that we would like to know you, who is in the room. Please write your role, position, affiliation. Wonderful. I'm so happy that it's working smoothly so far. And I wait a couple of seconds and then we will move with the answers. Excellent. Right. Meantime, I'm also reading out loud some of your affiliations. So international relations, diversity and inclusion, partnership, project manager, coordination unit, student, project coordinator, educational developer, student representative, SEIMA, very good, local office, Warwick, Ulysses, European project manager, coordination unit. All right. I think so. The project coordinator and project managers are kind of a big audience according to the colorful letters. Secretary, neurotech researcher, Action Line 2 for inclusion. Excellent. Euro Alliance. Excellent. Welcome, warm welcome to all. I suggest that student vice president, I suggest that with this combination, we see that how broad our audience is, and we hope that we will have a chance to connect with you later on. So I try to go to the next slide. Just let me see how this goes. Okay, on my screen I can see the other next question is that what words come to your mind when you think about inclusion in higher education? And I also put classroom or work environment, as you might work directly with students or in different university settings. And I hope that the technology will be good for us for this session. Please also check that you went to the next slide on your smartphone. I'm also waiting a little bit. And hopefully will show up. Oh, wonderful. All right. You also start reading it. Belonging, accessibility, time management, self-identification, no barriers, ergonomy, dialogue, decolonization, universal design, physical accessibility, chance, attitudes, funding, special needs, open mind, solidarity, chance, women, disabilities, respect, attention, technology, time management, adapted environments, invisible disability, beneficial for all, right? Just looking if any other things come up, attitudes, what else? Co-creation, very good, communication, adapted environments, etc. All right, so it looks really nice. And now that we are embracing those words, we can also work with those words later on, and we can also share with you the final results. So let's try another question. Hope that the technology is good. So once we discussed briefly your free associative thinking inclusion, let's move to diversity. So what comes to mind when you think of diversity among higher education students and staff? So this question is about diversity in the higher education sector. I hope that answers will come. Don't worry about it's just a free, accessible way of thinking, all right? Equitable opportunity for all, accepting each other and adapting to each other. Diversity equals more, better knowledge base, equality and equity, decolonizing the curriculum, very good. Getting other new perspectives, access for wheelchairs, etc. What else? Better accessibility, more collaboration, cooperation, and user-friendly environment, very important as well. All right. I hope it will come. Okay, need for staff training, very good, it's essential. Professional development are also essential in all areas of higher education. All right. I don't see anything else on my screen, but because it's that. But I think so. It's a good starting point. Let's move another more tailored to you. So now that we know that we saw your answers on inclusion and diversity, but think about yourself as an individual in your role. What can you do, even a tiny little baby step to foster inclusion? And you can also holistically think about your target audience, because inclusion, as you said, beneficial to all. Little baby steps, what you can do. So the focus is on you as a person. Yes, I'm waiting for some results. Okay. Let's see. Talk to colleagues and help to make their work more visible. Very good. Ask for what you want. If you don't, the answer will be always no. I train staff, so it's part of my work. Very good. Raise the best awareness possible at all management and design levels. Very, very good. Rethink myself. Very nice. Event organization, ask question to adopt to attendee specific need. Very good. Facilitate cooperation between colleagues, offices towards a more inclusive environment. Make sure the student representation include their diversity. And I cannot see the starting point on my screen, but don't worry, we will see the final results later on. All right, and the final question for this ice-breaking activity is that now we talked about your role, but what you think about how higher education, the European University Alliances and European alliances can further improve equality, diversity, and inclusion. So what we can do as institutions, either way as separate institutions or joining forces as alliances, between alliances, within alliances, what we can do to make the European higher education era more inclusive. There are more macro level actions for inclusion. All right, very good. Agenda setting and dialogue, create an inclusive framework, yes. Reducing barriers for international mobility, it's true. The European programs are also need this very much, very good. More female leaders, yes, diversifying leadership, be inclusive by design and be drivers of change, very, very good. What else? Encourage multiculturality, multilingualism, mobilities in all areas, student, staff, and teacher. Yes, very good. And I hope I can see a couple of more on my screen. Yes, by being the motor force for mainstreaming inclusion. I guess that the last one is inclusion because I don't see on my screen, but yes. All right, so I think so these are and have inclusion at the start, yes. So I think so these are different levels of engagement and different levels of actions. And today with the colleagues, we will also contribute further how you can engage. So I think so this went well, at least with the technology. Let's make it go back. Then I stop with this Mentimeter and let's go back to the screen. And I just kindly ask everyone to give me a sign if the full screen is getting ready. Now it's blank, yeah. Just checking the chat, all good. It's a very good thing, wonderful. All right, so now we had a little bit of activity with all of you and I'm very, very happy. So let's dive into the main areas. Just give me a second. I'm just changing my slide. Where is it? Oh my God, just give me a sec. So Mentimeter, and the next slide is, yes, is Charm EU. And now I will also check the 20 minutes again, just bear with me. I'm using my cooking watch and then off to go with the 20 minutes. All right, so the first thing was on the screen, the title, Mainstreaming Inclusion and Diversity in Charm EU. So when we hear this terminology, this is quite a terminology. So it means that injecting inclusion in every level or every area of our higher education work. So when this started, so the first question is when to do inclusion, mainstream inclusion and diversity in any kind of activities, not only in Charm EU. So let's start from the very beginning. We are delighted that the Charm EU Alliance has been approved as one of the selected alliances. We got selected in 2019, and in the grant proposal, it was planned originally by the writing team that there will be an inclusion work package, and this inclusion work package will have members and they will work on these issues. As I become, and I was delighted to become the team leader of this group once the selection and the approval of the alliance happened. I thought that we should not be alone within ourselves, but really connect with each other in the alliances. So early on, actually 2020 February, when the first big meeting happened, I initiated a new collaborative model for collaboration with other work packages and to create a co-creation regarding design, procedures, protocols, and policies. So we immediately catched or caught that what is needed, because if we are working parallel, it's not bringing mainstreamness or mainstreaming. So let's move further. Of course, all of the alliances were hit by COVID. So we were under this stress, and also we wanted to make sure that there is also we take care of our mental health and well-being. So, but we worked hard in this online environment and started to work towards the currently running master program on sustainability. And we realized that within the current structures, there are work packages, but the master program needs a division for equality, inclusion, and diversity. So work package 6, which I'm leading right now, acts as an interim office for these matters in order to support all students and staff. And from 2020-21, we also influenced the different work packages, and we push towards a more inclusive and diverse governance model. And today, every session is all about governance. So we pushed this agenda. On this slide, I highlighted a few actions, concrete items, how we transformed Charm EU organization and the master program. So first of all, the injection inclusion in every work package is designing the master program, working closely with students. We also have student representatives, and as well to make sure that the master program, every aspects of the master program have this inclusivity element in terms of admission, financial barriers, the teaching and learning environment, professional development, mobility, and last but not least, also how to create warm and welcoming environment. And just as a final wonderful news, we were acknowledged by the COFACE Europe, which is a European umbrella organization in the civil society for all families. And they recognized us as a best practice in Europe. So we are super delighted for that. So let's move on to the why. We always ask why inclusion and diversity matters, why we need inclusion in governance. Why is it not enough to just be as a service provision? And I've advocated with my team that in order to have a meaningful understanding and a meaningful approach for inclusion, we should be on a governance level as well. We can also support how Charm EU becomes an innovative, pioneering university model, and also an example for social inclusion as we all face global challenges, not only in education, but all areas of our work. And as well, we acknowledge that the higher education landscape is changing. The student and staff population is diversifying and the numbers are getting high. So it means that we need to meet this new demand of the European and the global higher education. What is important, I put on the slide triangle, which is two triangles, which means that there is a bottom-up and a top-down approach needed. So it's not enough to be inclusive and have grassroots activities from the bottom-up, but the leadership of universities must be very engaged on this topic, and as well avoid tokenism, as we also sometimes experience in a global level. Inclusion is everyone's business. So it's not only the diversity and equality division's work, everyone's business, and you find in all of your activities these aspects. Even if you are working, let's say, just funnily saying, if you are working on evacuation or what happens when it's health and safety at your universities, because we need to cater all the needs of everyone. All right, let's move on to the how. So what you can do, or what we did as Charm EU to make sure that we are injecting inclusion in the structures. We sit down with the governance team and with relevant stakeholders, and we said that in order to be top-down and bottom-up, top-down and bottom-up approach, yes, we should have inclusion, position inclusion on the top level, meaning that in the executive board, the DYI lead, the diversity, equity, and inclusion lead, will have a permanent seat. And why we are doing this? Because we want to make sure that this expert eye supports governance to uphold legal and statutory obligations, and also to shape the strategic vision and the mission of Charm EU and also the universities. And as well to represent the voices of the underrepresented groups. Additionally to that, more operational office is needed. So not only one person, but an office is needed who is kind of a collaborative, how you say, not collaborative, like a management level, and collaborates with different units and the different organizational units, and as well supports the students and staff in order to meet their own access needs and requirements. And what I also want to say in this environment, that inclusion is not only a kindness, but we should see that Charm EU and all the European universities are in the legal space. So we also need to make sure that we are supporting students and staff and avoiding any discrimination or avoiding any difficulties when it comes to legal entitlements. All right, so the third element is a so-called expert eye from outside of our bubble, who is an inclusion expert who will be welcome to the advisory board. This is also an external stakeholder who can really say that how our work is visible outside, having a fresh eye on our work, and also direct us. And as you may know, many in the UN, there are also rapporteurs for UN conventions and other ways, so that it's a common role. All right, so now let's move on the procedures, how we plan to do that. So what is this streamlining? The streamlining is that as we are working on the governance level, we also want to make sure that there is accountability, there is the legal procedures. Then we have this management or let's say operational level with the DYI office, and we are working collaboratively with all the 5 member institutions in Charm. And then as well, we are supporting all the organizational units, including the Charm EU academic staff, such as professionals. KCTs stands for knowledge creation teams, professional development, etc. So then this is our approach, and we hope that it will create a more smooth transition, smooth working way. All right. Now I'm getting closer to my final points. So as promised in the abstract, let's think about that, what you can do as organizations, individuals, students, staff, alliances, European stakeholders, global stakeholders, when you want to achieve inclusion in action and when you want to put in practice. So first of all, start working with your own values, visions, and missions, whether you are a civil society organization, whether you are a group of students and you have a student organization. Check those aspects and commit towards inclusion and diversity. And as I was saying, in terms of governance, the commitment is not only needed from bottom up, but top down. Then the next one is checking biases, stereotypes, and also kind of our biases when we are not necessarily interacting with different audiences. So, for example, anti-bias pieces of training can help, or you can have continuous professional development, either if you have many years of experience in higher education leadership. From time to time, it's good to check your own biases, as we might have conscious and unconscious biases. And it's really important to reflect on your blind spots, because we are human beings and we all make mistakes, but to be inclusive, we also must reflect on these mistakes. Then the next one, number 3, is empowerment for stepping into leadership. It means that you create pathways and alternative access routes for groups that usually excluded from leadership positions. And of course, many underrepresented groups are still excluded from those, and not only because their lived experiences, but because you have so-called hidden structural barriers that hinder the participation and access to those individuals. So check how you communicate, how you put your open calls, your recruitment processes, etc. And the easy way is mentoring programs, but you can also go beyond mentoring programs. Let's see number 4. So reach out and engage with people outside of your circle. It means that you might work in a group where you don't see many different views, and reach out, be proactive when you, for example, don't have students with different backgrounds or even colleagues from different backgrounds. Reach out to organizations who are working towards the rights of those people, or work towards the better living conditions or social inclusion of those peoples. So having diversity in your teams is definitely beneficial. And you can also see that not only the higher education sector, but also the business sector is in the recent years advocating for more and more diversity. And also they are listing all the benefits as well, how wonderfully we think about how we design products, programs, how we find solutions. So it's definitely beneficial. And then be proactive. The number 5 is be proactive to break down structural barriers. It's all about daring to speak up when it comes to hidden barriers, hidden structural barriers, or hidden power relations that might cause difficulties when it comes to governance or leadership. And well, among the barriers, of course, we face physical barriers, all kinds of barriers. Among the barriers is attitudinal barriers. So sometimes we should check our mindsets, how those barriers are there. And then again, the behaviors of individuals is very important, and also surround yourself with people who can help you in these aspects. All right, so then I'm very good, because according to my watch, I have 3 minutes left, so I was faster than expected. And now I give the floor to our Utopia colleagues, and a warm welcome again. And I can also help with the slide moving on. So just let me know that next slide. The floor is yours. And I also start with the 20 minutes.
Thank you, Agnes, and thank you for the invitation. It's nice to be here. So here we are. You can see our names and our universities. We are from 3 different universities, the 3 of the 6 original universities from the Utopia Alliance. Now we are 10 universities, as you can see. Thank you. So next slide, please. What can you expect from us? So, there. You will expect an overview of what we call the work package 5.
It's the previous slide.
Anyway, never mind. So yeah, the overview of our work package 5 instead of 6, it's 5 on inclusion. We will also tell you where we are now, and it's about the co-creation with students and with the challenges, opportunities, and our way forward. So thank you. Next slide, Agnes. Thank you. So what is Utopia? Utopia stands for European Universities Transforming to an Open, Inclusive Academy. So the I and the O are very important. They are key values in Utopia. And we have 7 work packages in different areas. However, today we have only time to talk about the work package 5, which is about promoting inclusion and equal societies. So our mission is to promote and ensure that higher education is inclusive and accessible to all students. Thank you. Yes. So this work package 5 is primarily composed of 2 sub-packages. As you can see, the first one is about developing a strategy for inclusion of disadvantaged student communities. And the other one is about regional outreach and capacity building. So we'll take the next click. Agnes, thank you. So you can, the first package that we will be focusing on today covers 3 outcomes. It is about the common definition of disadvantage. It is also about mapping the effects and challenges to inclusion initiatives. And lastly, but not the least, developing strategies for inclusion. The other work package, which I will not be touching on, is actually about knowledge sharing, knowledge production, and capacity building together with the countries that are still not within the European Union. So it's a kind of an inclusion practice too. But I will not be touching on that. So we can go back to the first work sub-package. Thank you, Agnes. How did we start? We started a little bit later than you did. We started March, the first week of March. Remember, it's a very significant week. We were in Ljubljana, a 2-day kick-off, and the principles that were highlighted during just kick-off was participation, co-creation. So nothing about us without us. Maybe you cannot really notice that almost half of the persons in that room were actually students from disadvantaged communities. So we started already bringing them in right from the start. But then everybody knows that after 2 weeks, the pandemic happened. So we had to rewrite our plans again, but we still have this co-creation process in mind. Thank you, Agnes. Can we go to the next slide? And how did we start? What were the first collaboration efforts that we did? The first collaboration effort is actually to get to know each other. So trying to explore and understand each other's current state with regards to inclusion. So we looked at 3 aspects. We looked at the legal frameworks that were applied. When we say legal frameworks, it's about the legislation, the steering documents, policies, and everything that we apply at the universities. And the second one is about what are the definitions and methods that we apply with regards to inclusion. And the third is, of course, the data that we collect concerning students and groups that are so-called disadvantaged. And to do this, we actually devised 3 survey templates. One survey on students, the second one on staff, and the third one is on the definition of inclusion. So using these 3 templates, we gathered the picture of what is happening at that time. This is 2020 at each university. And we did a comparative analysis of this. Actually, I want to mention that the second survey, the survey template on staff, was highlighted or suggested by the students because it was not really in our description. But the students really were very firm and very sure about that this is very important because you cannot separate us from the staff. The staff is an integral part of our learning environment. So what is happening, disadvantage happening among the students could also be happening among the staff. So we also have to think of inclusion with regards to staff. And what is the aim? What do we want for output? The output is actually to create or produce an operational common framework for identifying disadvantaged student communities. And we highlighted in this first outcome the new approach. Instead of talking of fixing the disadvantages, or we need to think of inclusion instead, to be an inclusive university, inclusive alliance, where we emphasized that we have to rethink, we have to revitalize, we have to develop our university cultures, our university structures, and our learning environment. So instead of just thinking of groups, we need to think of everybody. We need to think of all the members of the university, all levels and all parts of the university, which includes staff and students. And there is evidence that there is a lot to gain if we do that, that to create really inclusive structures, inclusive culture, and inclusive learning environment. So what we want to aim at is to expose and also eliminate various forms of inequalities, especially structural inequalities, discrimination, biases, and so on. So I think my colleague Shema and Lewis will elaborate on how we are building this culture and environment later on. So the first...
sorry, are we good on the slides or should I move?
Yes, we are not, it's okay.
Okay.
Yeah. I didn't touch on in the previous slide, we said that inclusion is the goal that we strive for, but it is also the process to reach inclusion. So it's a double effort in that case. And so the first output was actually analyzing the current state, the definitions, the methods, the legislation, and everything that we have now. To identify, the next step is to identify good practices. What are we doing good? What are working? What is not? So we have to identify the areas of best practices and challenges. We have to scrutinize practices within the curriculum as well as beyond the curriculum. So here we also prepared another survey with 2 frameworks, looking at practices within the curriculum and also beyond the curriculum. And yes, I think I will soon hand over. I have the last slide. I want just to read it because we're trying to take a definition of inclusion, which is the goal that we strive for, but also the process that we strive for. But we know that disadvantage and inclusion are very, very difficult words to define, a very complex phenomena. So we say that we cannot really define it once and for all. And what we were doing is that it is always evolving because of the things that is happening within the university, in society, and even in the world. We know that now because crises are coming and there are different situations, circumstances that could also enable us to see different perspectives, enable us to recognize inequalities, new inequalities, and exclusionary practices, previously not identified or not even generated. So in that way, inclusion is always living. Even our frameworks are living documents. Because when we did it, I said the current state, that was August 2020. So actually the framework is good, but we need to do it again. We have to use it. We have to follow it up and see what is our inclusive, what is inclusion now and what are our inclusive practices. So I think I'll hand it over to you, Shema. The next slide, please. Because co-creation is an important principle, and that is where you come in. And there's another word that we also relate to inclusion, and that is empowerment. I think Agnes touched to that also. So, Shema.
Thank you so much, Catherine. So Catherine touched upon what has already been done in the previous deliverables. I will be talking in a few minutes about what we're doing right now in the current deliverable, which is, actually you can go to the next slide, Agnes. Which is actually co-creating the whole with students, in co-creation with them, because we really believe that our role as Utopia as a whole, as a project, is actually to create an inclusive environment for students. and actually doing that with building this inclusive environment with a student community. So in concrete terms, actually, we set up some ideas. So first of all, we have created or constructed a framework that shows us what an inclusive university or environment should look like in terms of policy, but also in terms of practices. So we also include some case studies that we really want to subject to students' view as well. We want to know what they think about the case studies that we showcase them. And actually, we really realized in a very early stage that we need to involve them. We need to know what their critical view is on everything that we're doing. As Catherine already said, we can't do anything for them without them. So that's why we are running focus group with students for the moment. We are discussing our deliverable with them. We ask them what they experience, what kind of inclusion and what kind of exclusion they already experienced. And also we ask them to suggest improvements as well. So what we noticed in one of the first focus groups that we ran is actually that the definition, how they see inclusion is actually not specifically what we how we experience it. So although we already created the definition, it's for us very important to hear and understand what their definition of inclusion is.
You don't really have the definition.
Yeah,
yeah.
And even that concept is something living and it's changing. So and I think it's personal also. It's and that's why we really want to implement that in the framework as well. So you can go to the next slide. So as I already said, we are doing this in co-creation with students based on their personal experiences. And actually that means that we are building a community for them. We give them the opportunities to, so it's also for me or for us as a whole, creating opportunities for students to give them the opportunity to work together in an international community. So the focus groups actually are not only focus groups within the universities, but we provide also collective focus groups where they actually meet each other, where they meet other university cultures, because for example, the culture in Brussels around inclusion is not the same as in Gothenburg or Warwick. So that's why we think it's really important to get them to know each other. Also, we really step into dialogue with them. We try to ask their questions, and we really want to create interaction. So the focus group is really something that we try to do offline. But also online, we created a kind of channel on Discord where we, for example, ask them their reflection on what inclusion is. And we really keep that very open for them. So they either choose to do it in a very artistic way by poems or graphic design. And on the other hand, we try to make the connection with the framework, that they really comment and amend on the framework, how it exists today, because we have created that from our own experience and expertise. But of course, we really want them to have a critical view on that as well. So for the moment, we are doing that with focus groups. So from the beginning, we asked ourselves, okay, but what's in it for the students? Because I actually very often hear, okay, but you asked our engagement, but what do we get in return? It should be a win-win, and it's completely understandable. So where it's possible, we try to pay them as a student job. Where not possible, we try to hand out certificates, for example, where we acknowledge the soft skills, where it's now really very important on the job market to prove which kind of, like, for example, leadership skills you have. So we try to reward them for the work that they are giving us, because it's valuable. Yeah, you can go to the next slide. We may ask ourselves what the purpose is of the focus groups. Well, for us, actually, it's really gathering valuable information on the different issues and challenges that we face. So it will also help us to change the framework. As Catherine said, it's a living document and we really wanted to keep it alive. So it's something that we subject to the critical view of students on one hand, and on the other hand, we ask students as well to identify good practices, best practices, but also what is for them a bad practice and why. And actually, we are doing the analysis afterwards to understand what principles that are behind best practices. Yeah, you can go to the next slide. So, and what do we expect at the end of this deliverable is actually that we have a framework that had been subject of critical student review, and that will show us actually how an inclusive environment will look like in terms of policies and practices. Also, we are creating or developing policy measures, and really at the end, because we are working with Utopia weeks at every partner university, we want to disseminate the results of what has been happening in the previous deliverables, and that should be also done by students. So we really want them to give them the opportunity to be able to, you know, travel to other partner universities and really live and feel what the other cultures or university cultures look like. So now I will pass the floor to my colleague Louis, who is online.
Hey, thanks, Shema. Yes, so I guess just to offer a few concluding comments, for us, the most important element of our work is really the process that Catherine and Shema have been talking about. Because inclusion is not a fixed, frozen category, because our approach to this issue will always need to evolve, we've really focused on proving certain things about how we work and how we are capable of working, both amongst our colleagues in the partner institutions, but also, as Shema was just saying, with students. So first, among the partners, the universities, we have set out to prove that we can share all this information about inclusion and that we can analyze that data to find unique strengths, to identify common ground, and create something that reflects all of this work, something which we call the Utopia Inclusion Framework. And that was what we focused on in the first part of our project. And then more recently, we focused on working with the students. And here we've really set out to prove that we can engage students in that critical dialogue about inclusion in higher education, and that we can then facilitate collaboration between staff and students. And that through that collaboration process, we can then co-create a new Utopia Inclusion Framework, an evolved version of that first output that's co-created with students. And that framework is then intended to reflect this whole process that we've been through in an accessible and easily understood format, so that anyone can look at it and say, this is how Utopia approaches inclusion now, and how Utopia plans to approach inclusion in the future. Next slide, please. So speaking of the present and the future, we're currently reflecting on the challenges that we face at the moment and the challenges that we have to look forward to as Utopia progresses. Until now, in our pilot phase, inclusion has had its own dedicated work package, and it's been good to have that dedicated space to think about these issues. But in the long run, we are thinking about how to move beyond this model of a separate inclusion work package and towards a model where inclusion is integrated across the whole alliance. We've spent a lot of time thinking about that and discussing that with other work packages as we've gone along through this process we've described. And that process is also helping us it's helping us to create our current deliverables, our outputs for the pilot project, but it is also our way of grappling with these broader challenges. We're using that framework and that co-creative process that we're establishing to lay the groundwork for a future Utopia Alliance, where this kind of process and this kind of dialogue is integrated in a holistic and hopefully sustainable way. So those are my comments, and I'll just hand back to Catherine to wrap up.
Thank you, Louis, and thank you for listening to us. And we really believe that together with students, co-creating with students and with society, we can minimize and eventually eliminate effects and experiences of disadvantage. It is a commitment to. So if we don't have that commitment, it will be difficult. So it's a commitment for all in our institutions and even society to establish and maintain a culture and process that are really truly inclusive for all. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I'm very delighted to hear all of your processes. And I'm even more happy that we are joining forces, because together we can also shape the European higher education area. Within our alliances, we can also create a lot of change, and together we can even go beyond those changing that also the European higher education environment needs, and also the global environment needs. So I suggest that we are absolutely on time. It's also an access need in order to be inclusive towards everyone. We have 30 minutes. The last 30 minutes is divided for a question and answer time and a final conclusion words by me. So I also suggest that now here are the question and answer time for, I would say that now we have, it's 3:30, so I would suggest that we have 15 to 20 minutes for discussion. And I kindly ask the colleagues on the location to help us with voice and with all the things. And then after that, in the last 5 to 10 minutes, I will conclude today's session, and we can also see how it goes on. So let's see the chat. I also see no question online for the moment. Thank you. I will also use this little chat here, but I'm very looking forward to the audience question on the spot. So I kindly ask the colleagues for questions, and we can also have somebody to repeat the questions that we can better hear with Louise.
Are there questions here?
Or comments?
Yeah, that would be good, because I think what you're doing is absolutely great. But I also know the university. You have experience of resistance. How do you deal with that? And yeah.
That's a very good question, actually. Yeah, she was asking, how do we deal with the resistance? Because there is resistance. Not everybody says this is good. Inclusion is what we want. So, and that is a very good and very relevant question. So, Agnes, maybe you want to say something about that. How do we deal with the resistance?
I just a moment. All right, so I also see on my screen, do you experience resistance at your university? How do you deal with that? So yes, I would start that inclusion and diversity are still not high on the agenda in higher education, which is not only our experiences, but experiences of many conferences in the recent decades. So I suggest that we should open doors and create spaces, respectful spaces for dialogue, because I also experience many times that not everyone is keen on inclusion, and they also have doubts, concerns. But I think so that if we are open for respectful and even sometimes delicate conversations and dialogues on that, we can also change change or shape the discussion. In terms of the resistance, I would say that it's sometimes because of the unknown. So the fear of unknown, that how we do that, is it overwhelming? Oh my God, I cannot imagine how a student would do that, or how the student could access or participate in the classroom environment. So we have so many things, but once we start making the unfamiliar more familiar and creating spaces with all the people, then I think so this unfamiliarity and fear of unknown becomes more natural. Yeah, I can go on and on, but I want to give the floor back to the colleagues.
Thank you. It is very important, everything that you said. And I worked a lot with what we call widening access and participation in higher education. So, you know, there is an inequality, structural inequality within that. I call it that vertical, who are going to the university and who are not. And in Sweden, now I work, because I came from the University of Gothenburg, my experience is even in other countries too, is that when you say widening access and widening participation, then there is a kind of a perception. For me, it's a perception that, oh, the quality will be lower because we are taking in groups, new groups. And I think we have to tell them that it's the other way around. So it's not a problem. Widening access and opening up is not a problem, but it is actually a precondition for quality and excellence, if you want to use that word. So I think that is very important. But of course, we have to work with our staff and everybody at the university so that the diversity that is coming in is really being, the resources, the potential in that group is really being used or it is shown at the university. So yeah, I think I'll stop to that because there is another question here.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think it's a very, very good question, and I agree that yes, there is that distance, and I think it's really depends on the starting point of the discussion. If you think about disability, for example, the type of diversity, from the medical aspect, or that it's the problem of the person, then of course there will be resistance, and there will be professors who are saying that the quality will be lower. But if you are starting with another type of attitude, which is the social kind of disability, social aspect of disability, then you can say it's the problem of the society if they cannot solve the problem of the person. So it's not the person's problem, but the society's, which is not accessible. I think this is very important, that all staff and the university should look at it as a value, that we are accessible.
Yes, definitely accessible, open, and inclusive. Those are difficult words, but I think we cannot give up. And then Agnes used the word the unknown. Actually, we have a science festival where the theme is the unknown now, because of everything that is happening now. And we have people coming in to the country, and there is an unknown. So we have this, and we are highlighting this. So we have a workshop that will be a kind of a space where we discuss this with the public, with people who are what is citizenship, what is migration, or what does it mean? Because sometimes, as Agnes said, if it is unknown and it's not familiar, then you get some kind of, there is a fear. So yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thanks. I have a naive question. How much does university cost here?
How much do
you pay for a year?
No, we don't have any tuition in Sweden.
So there's no tuition. So that's wonderful, because in North America, that's not the case. So when you're talking about widening opportunities, there's so many people who are marginalized, not even people just with disabilities, but just in the general population that can afford to go to university.
Yes, the economic resource is a barrier,
Yeah.
but still we have a problem
Absolutely.
with the widening access. So
Yeah.
that is not the real problem.
Yeah, so I wanted to take a step back from that and
Yes.
say, because it's free, the opportunities here in
It's
Europe
there.
are so much greater than they are from where I come from. And I think it's incredible that we're talking about these talking points now, when in North America, it's not even a point of topic. People can't even get into the universities, let alone afford them. I had to take out more than 40,000 in student loans just to pay for my masters. That's incredible. And then I come here and the university is free. I'm getting a PhD in a foreign country, and now we're getting to talk about how can we make it easier and more accessible for everyone. I just want to say that that's amazing.
Yes.
So, I mean, the work that you do, I'm part of the diversity
Okay,
and
thank you.
work package as well. It's up with Eurotech EU, and I think everyone is just doing this incredible work.
Okay,
I just
thank
wanna say
you.
that.
But so that I'm not lying, because if
Yeah.
you are coming from outside the European Union, then you have to pay the tuition fee now in Sweden.
Okay.
So that is a change that happened, I'm not sure, it's around 6 years ago. So,
Well, that's not the case in Germany, so.
Okay, good.
Welcome to Germany.
Okay, thank you. Yes, so there are differences too. So it's a little bit this alliance, what we are creating. The university of the future, there are a lot of things we need to harmonize and talk about. That's why we always say agreed framework in this sense, and we are not finished. So we are still talking about it, and we are talking with the students at the moment, because they have also good ideas. And what we have already, the frameworks that we had proposed, they actually make it better. So, thank you for that.
Catherine,
Sorry.
may I just add
Yes,
something
sorry.
about the finances? If I could catch the discussion, it's all about finances. I think so that here comes our work and joining forces together, not only in higher education access and participation, because many students face financial barriers and financial restrictions to access higher education, especially those for underrepresented groups. But also I want to highlight that actually with one of my Hungarian colleagues who are sitting in the room, we have been also working a lot with the Erasmus program, how to make it more accessible, and with the European Commission. And still there are many financial barriers to participate in, for example, in Erasmus program or in any kind of mobility. So I think so that what we can bring together later to the door to the European Commission and different stakeholders, that how we can join forces to support these, to dismantle the financial barriers. So I think so it's important. All right, let's see what else is on the floor in terms of questions.
Please, there was another one or comments. You don't have to ask a question. Yes, please.
I have one about the student group. And well, how do you choose definitely how do you reach out to the students? How do you make them contact you? How do you make sure you reach them out all different 7 pages?
Yes, you are talking of students.
Yes,
already in that perspective. Yeah, okay.
Maybe,
Yes, maybe
I can elaborate on that. So we created a kind of a guideline for all the different kind of partners when recruiting the students. So it was really very important that those students were experience-based. So they experienced inclusion or exclusion, and we really created a group of very diverse students. So we have students with physical disabilities, we have students with ethnic migration background. And for me personally, I can only talk for Brussels, but because I didn't do the recruitment for other universities. But I know, because I'm part of the equality team at the University of Brussels. So I'm very close to students. I kind of know the student association, so I really reached out to them. Like, okay, they didn't even know what Utopia was, so that was the problem already that existed. Like, okay, we are participating in this European project, but actually students have no clue that we are doing this. So that's why I already realized it's very important to include them, to create a bigger visibility of the project. And then we really, we noticed that now it's like, in Dutch we say mond-à-mond reclame, but it's like, it's a campaign for them. It's marketing also for the project, that they talk with each other. Students really tell each other that this kind of opportunities exist. So for me, it was really a personal reach out to the different student associations that really worked around this kind of teams. So for example, in Brussels, we have the student associations with the colonized VUB, but we also have VUB Equality Network. We have Women in Academia. So I personally reached out with a personal email to those associations. I explained the project and I asked them if they were interested. And then, of course, their reaction was, okay, but what's in it for us? So because it shouldn't be like one-sided. And then we started thinking about, okay, well, what can we offer them? And it was for us important to be a safe space as well. So they were there and they can just talk openly about how they experience things. So that's really the way of how I handled it.
Maybe we could also ask Louis, how did you recruit the students at Warwick?
Yes, it's a very good question, and it's a little like what Shema was saying. I think there were already some teams or departments in the University of Warwick who were actually already paying students to do roles a bit like this, where they work on projects that are related to inclusion, to spreading, certain promoting ideas, I guess, amongst the student community. And so we really reached out to them. We had co-creation officers from the Institute for Advanced Teaching and Learning, innovation fellows as well. And often these students are actually recruited in the first place on a similar basis to what Shema was talking about, and in a way that, that takes into account diversity. And so we recruited a really interesting group of students who have lots of different perspectives on different kinds of issues. The other thing I might say in response to that question is that we're also looking in some depth at each other's kind of inclusion practices, and those practices themselves are run by people who talk to students, who know communities of students. Again, it's a bit like the bodies, the groups that Shema was talking about. So I think in the long run as well, we'll be having more of those conversations with them, and really getting a broader sense of how student views and student perspectives have already been gathered at the different universities, and trying to kind of bring those insights together.
Thank you. I also might add some things from our side in Charm EU. So we are also working with students. We also have the Charm EU student body and the student representatives, but beyond this, we are also working with civil society organizations, youth organizations within our universities and beyond on a European level to reach out. And it was very, very successful, especially when we reached out to the admission processes or the open call for the master program back in the days, because usually those students are not necessarily having those informations right ahead. But if the specific umbrella organizations receive this information, they can again reach out and engage with those students. And what I'm also happy to hear from all of the colleagues here at Utopia, that really relying on the already existing networks and widening our circles that are not necessarily in the mainstream communication channels with us, because as well, lack of information or inaccessible information might be also a cause that many students might not think that, for example, Charm EU or Utopia is trying to be inclusive. So important also to have a proactive approach to state in your documentation, in your communication, that you are reaching out. And what is also a wonderful element in our other areas of work packages, the business and society stakeholder engagement, and also external engagement for our master program. And we are also advising and supporting that it's a diverse aspects of that. And as well that those organizations also have not only for the topic, but also that led by people with lived experiences. So it's also important. All right. I'm also checking the time. We have 3-4 minutes. Yes.
I have one question here. So please.
Yes. We have 4 minutes for questions.
4 questions. Yeah.
We talked about disabilities, different types, like you mentioned, and the students have special needs, and we are working on how we can promote adaptation in class or something. Can you give us maybe some adaptation that you have made in your university that you want to create, or something that you can help more specifically the students, something concrete?
You mean a definition about inclusion in general?
Yes. For example, you have a student who is blind and decides to how can we help to students based on adaptation?
Well, that's the work that we are doing right now, is creating the framework. So it's been created by us, and we have like different core principles. We have legislation, but also we have different kind of practices, and we are in the phase that we are running through all the different kind of practices. Like, for example, a curriculum scan, like knowing which kind of curricula that has been offered to students. Is it still relevant? Can we decolonize it in any way? But also, how can we very easily make classrooms accessible? So as soon as it's finished, it will be also showcased on the website, so you can have a look there.
Thank you.
Yes.
So just to follow up on this, so is this something that's already active at the universities? Is there already a special needs?
In Brussels, for example,
Okay.
yes, in Brussels, for example, we have done the curriculum scan. So we really had a focus group with different kind of professors to ask them if they can, for example, implement other kind of authors instead of always pointing out different the Western philosophers, for example. We also have a practice around gender, more female professors.
Sorry, actually, I'm just going to stop you. That's not actually where I was going with my question. What I wanted to know was people with disabilities who are either blind or deaf or have learning disabilities. Are there adaptations in the classes already?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
So
That is already in place.
Yes. I was going to say that's something that we have in North America, but I wasn't quite sure how it's here. So you should have a center where students can go like learning.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. Great. And then you're just trying to even broaden that even.
Yes.
more.
Yes.
That's
Exactly.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sorry, that's for your Utopia team. Do you plan to make a focus or some more focus groups among the leaders? Because I think it's very important what the leaders think about the inclusion. Of course, student is the biggest.
Yes.
This one, yes.
The thing is that, as I mentioned, one of the outputs will be that the results will be disseminated by the students to the government board, for example. And from there on, we really want to have like their commitment to involve and to implement actually what has been created. Because it's been a pilot project for 2 years, so we've been working for 2 years on creating policy measures and practices. So we need their commitment as well. And actually, they already gave their commitment at the beginning of the project, because as you know, Utopia is an acronym, and I in Utopia stands for inclusion. So it's not possible that we are doing all this work, and at the end of the story, they will say like, yeah, okay, all good and well, it's nice to have, and it's a good marketing strategy. But I hope that's not the case. So. Yeah.
And that is our next step.
Yes.
Actually, we have to disseminate it internally and externally, and also see to it that it will be implemented.
Yes.
So we are hoping for that. We still have this year in the pilot phase. So sorry, we are not really finished yet. So you have a question?
Yeah, we have a little bit more time on that. You talk a lot about how you can make the studies more inclusive for students already enrolled in universities.
Yes.
Do you do any actions to reach out to those students or persons or groups who are outside university because of the barriers that doesn't allow them to come in?
Yes, yes.
Yes,
that is an outreach, because that is very important. And we always say that this inequality, structural. Some people ask me, but everybody does not have to go to the university. Of course, I said I have no objection about that. But if the barrier is my gender or my economic background or where I live or where I come from, then I think it's not a well-informed decision. And it is a very difficult, because these things happen very early, according to many research. So we have to do and reach out to, even in the primary school, to actually collaborate with schools, with different civil organizations, to make the university or make it visible that it is opportunity for all. But that you have a choice. So your gender, or your background, your parents' education is not a barrier. So we do that kind of work. It's a lot of work, and it's very, we have to involve the whole university. So I have to involve all the researchers, the teachers, the students, everybody. So yeah, it's a work that is being done, because we are talking about legislation. We said that legislation is a very important and necessary prerequisite. In Sweden, it is in the Higher Education Act that we have to promote and widen access to higher education. So we are being evaluated. It happened last year, actually. So we had to report on what have you been doing. So is it, and I think you have been doing too. And I think Warwick, Louis, are you with us? Because Warwick is very also active in this type of outreach programs.
Very much so, and one of the nice things about Utopia is it's a chance to learn about each other's actions in those areas. So we've done some really interesting comparisons in our case study between, for example, CY Cergy in Paris, their wonderful kind of widening participation activities, and the ones we do here in Warwick as well. And it's very rewarding to kind of learn about each other's work like that.
Yes.
Agnes, did you want to say something?
Yes, I just wanted also to comment Katherine's and also yours point that yes, there are in many of our countries actually and universities outreach programs, including also national programs or settings such as alternative access routes to higher education, which we can also rely on, or at least it's beneficial for the European University Alliances. And for example, those students who are coming from not a traditional or not a smooth educational journey, but coming from other areas, there are also alternative access routes for them. Also, many of our countries have other outreach programs. They are also contact with high schools, with schools from secondary education. So I'm very, very delighted to see it. And yes, true, we are learning from each other. And I think that this brings the quality, the inclusiveness, and also the competitiveness of the European higher education area. I'm also conscious about the time. Now it's 57, so we have one slide time, 3 minutes before we close the meeting. I want to keep sharing my screen. Let's see if it goes. Yes. So the wrap up of the workshop is that, first of all, what I wrote here on the slide, that it's a little point from my doctoral thesis. It says ensuring inclusion and equity in all areas of higher education should therefore not be based on a philanthropic approach, but rather on alignment with basic human rights. A human rights approach requires various actors within society to actively promote the necessary conditions for all individuals to fully realize their rights. So I think so that as Catherine and the colleagues highlighted, and as we highlighted in Charm EU, the legislative space is important. And then it's also important that these are, we should see it as a human rights-based approach. And you can also read many articles and many research on this topic if you look on a global level. And last but not least, what I can summarize from our discussion today, that everyone's business is inclusion, and it's important to create dialogues, reach out to different organizational units, knock on the door of each other just to say hello, and opening doors, and not only within our alliances and within our universities, but between our universities. And that's why I'm so happy that today we had this joint session. And with our joint recommendations and joint recognitions of the barriers, including together with the student and also individuals with own lived experiences and access needs, can also bring and shape the European Union and the European Commission, shape the higher education and also inform the European stakeholders what to do. And as well as just a final note here that we are also within the social dimension of the Bologna process. So we should also think about these as our nations committed to these inclusive aspects of the Bologna process back in the days. So I think so that we have a lot to do, but we have wonderful colleagues, wonderful students, and alliances to push this agenda forward. So with this, I think so we are perfectly on time. Just my alarm clock indicated that it's 4 o'clock. I would really thank the audience on the location and online, and keep in touch. And really, please feel free to ask for further things. And maybe we can wrap up with the session with an inclusive photo, at least with the speakers on the location and online. So somehow I kindly ask the colleagues before we disappear in this hybrid environment. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Agnes.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot to the audience because you made it really interesting for us. So, yeah.